Are you ready to hustle?
I need to hustle.
Welcome to The Hustle with Justin Harrison, the ultimate podcast for money motivation and inspiration.
In this season of The Hustle, we're concentrating on your personal finance questions. And today we have a hustler with us. Carl, you've got some questions for me and hopefully I've got the answers. So let's talk about it. What is your first question?
Well, Justin, we had a chat about personal finance, and the one question is, how do you save when you don't have money to save?
Great question. So look, there's only one of two answers to solve this problem, right? You either need to earn more or you need to spend less. Now, the problem is most people get into the cycle of focusing on earning more. And whilst they focus on earning more, they're getting themselves into debt because they're spending more than they earn. So the most logical way to stem the tide is you have to cut down those expenses. Now, I know people say, listen, there's nothing more I can cut. I'm absolutely at the bottom. But here is the uncomfortable truth. You have to go further. You have to cut everything that you can cut. For some people, that might mean you've got to leave your house and you've got to house share with other people. For some people, that means you have to get rid of your car and you've got to live share with people. For some people, that will mean really doing uncomfortable things. This is just the reality. People want a magic answer. People want a magic solution. There is no magic solution here. You have to spend less than you earn, and then you have to figure out how to earn more to get out of this lifestyle that you're in. And what a lot of people don't understand about the journey to financial wealth is that you have to make a lot of sacrifices early on in this journey. And part of that is getting rid of the absolutely unnecessary expenditure. Now, there's a lot of people say, well, I don't have unnecessary expenditure. I'm living with as little as I can already. The uncomfortable part of this conversation is you're just going to have to figure it out because there is no magic bullet. The bottom line is money is like resource, like any other resource, like water out of the tap. If you leave the tap open, the tap is going to run dry. And this is what's happening for most people. So sometimes when I make these comments, people look at me dazed and confused and they don't really understand it, but it's a very simple equation. If you spend more than you earn, you're always going to be in trouble. And if you don't develop the discipline now, while the times are hardest, when you get more money, you're just going to continue having the same habits you've always had. And so it is really important to figure out. That means cut out the DSTV, cut out the gym membership, cut out whatever you can cut out. Get rid of it, right? If that means eating rice and tuna every night, if it means eating baked beans on toast every night, that's what you've got to do. You have to make the sacrifice. What's your second question?
My second question is, how do you account for unplanned expenses that are over and above what you budgeted for?
Again, great question, and it leads right back to the first question, right? So you have to make room in your finances for emergencies. COVID was a great example of this. We have been told for generations, set aside 3 to 6 months savings, right? And then what we do is we don't do that. And we have what is known as lifestyle creep. We buy the car, we buy the house, we rent the house, whatever, right? We get the furniture, we do the stuff that society's taught us to do. And so before we know it, we're in the situation where we are spending more than we earn. And then, heavens forbid, even if you're budgeting well, you get to a position where, you know, maybe you've just got 10% breathing room in your budget and suddenly a 20% expense comes over and above what you're earning, and now suddenly you're in trouble. So the answer goes back to the first situation. You've got to make sure that you spend less than you earn. You've got to be setting aside savings. So now the magic question is how much, right? Because what you need to be focusing on is you should be trying to get to a point where you do not spend more than 50% of what you earn. That means you'd be setting aside 50% all the time. Now, I know for where you're sitting right now, it probably seems very unrealistic. It means you're going to have to go have a hard conversation with yourself, look in the mirror and make some really hard life choices if you want to change the situation that you're in. And then, you know, as for your current situation, the bottom line is when those unexpected expenses come your way, you're going to have to figure out how to deflect them. You're going to have to figure out how to do without it. You're going to have to figure out how to go without. And this is part of the financial journey, Carl, that nobody talks about. Nobody talks about the suffering. The first 5 years towards financial freedom is suffering, right? And what you can't see right now, which I can see because I've been on this path, The early sacrifices is the thing that's going to make you successful long term. And so those unexpected expenses that crop up, listen, this is like water out of the tap. If there is no water coming out of the tap because the taps have run dry, what do? You're going to have to figure out how to make a plan, right? And that's the same thing with your money. You're going to figure out how to hustle. You're going to have to figure out how to maybe barter your time. You're going to have to do things that you never thought you would do. And I was there. I got to a point where I was earning a lot of money. And because of the journey I'd been on, I chose only to spend 10% of what I earned for a very long period in my life. I continued to sleep on the floor. I continued to go without. And I'm so grateful I made those choices early on because that created the momentum. And you don't have to do it forever. So, Carl, this is the other thing. Understand that sacrifice is temporary. But in financial terms, pain is permanent. And if you don't make the choice now to make different choices, you're going to always be stuck in that rut that 99% of the people are, which is not earning enough to keep ahead with the expenses, not having emergency savings so that when unforeseen expenses come, you're sitting in the situation asking yourself those questions. So the first thing you need to do to pull yourself out of the system is to accept and understand that the world that has been put around you in terms of consumerism and consumption and the vehicles we drive and the houses we live in and our aspirations has got nothing to do with your current reality. And if you can go back to walking to work, my advice is walk to work. Ditch the gym membership, get your steps in. I know it sounds like crazy advice, right? But these are the sacrifices you have to make. And when you find the conviction within yourself to understand that you're on the path to financial freedom, these small but very painful sacrifices in the beginning are absolutely meaningless in the next 20 years of your life.
But
Makes sense?
Yeah, it does. It does make sense. So my third question to you, Justin, is I have a side hustle and I try and do multiple things, but however, my main source of income takes a lot of my time. So how do I put aside time to make money in other places?
Great question. So I'm a big fan of people side hustling. I'm a great fan of people building up secondary and third forms of income, which is probably going to be my next piece of advice, by the way. You need to figure out how to reduce your expenses and then figure out how to earn extra income. And maybe that is very different from what you're currently doing. Maybe you can do it in the evenings. Maybe you can do it on weekends. Here's the thing, right? If you're not covering expenses, you shouldn't be sitting on your backside on the weekend watching Netflix. You should be up hustling and figuring out how to make money. If that even means picking up a bucket and a sponge and washing cars on a weekend, trust me, hustlers, if you want to succeed, you got to get out there and do things that you thought were outside of your comfort zone that you have to focus in on. So let's talk about the side hustle, right? The bottom line is you have to figure out how to balance things. And this is life. Life is a balancing act. It's, do I take away time from this? Do I take away money from there? How do I balance things? So the first question I have before I answer your question is, your main source of income, is it from self-employment? Is it from being employed? Is it a contract?
From being employed.
Okay. Now, this is going to be the most controversial piece of advice you've ever heard of in your life. And I say this as somebody who employs thousands of people. And I'm telling you this the same way I tell my own employees. Understand that your job should only consume a set number of hours every day. What they are buying from you is, let's say, 8 to 4 or 8 to 5 during the day. The hours outside of that should be dedicated to building yourself up. You should spend every waking moment outside of that figuring out how to get your hustle to a point where the income at least exceeds what you're currently earning in your form of employment. Because understand something. If your intention is to eventually take your side hustle and turn it into something permanent, you need to pitch up, do your work, be good at doing your work, but you need to commit that at 5 o'clock, I'm finished, I'm done. You're not paying me for these hours. I'm not going to go earn on my hours. And you need to spend every single waking moment you can. Turn off the TV, turn off the phones, concentrate on your hustle. How do you build that up? How do you grow it? Okay. During your lunch hour, if that is your lunch hour, don't eat. Don't eat. It will save you money, right? Don't eat. And then go and figure out how to get clients in your lunch hour. This is how you grow your side hustle. But you cannot take your side hustle and turn it into your main hustle until your income exceeds what you're currently earning. And this is what I tell people. People say, I'm scared to take the leap of faith. I'm scared. Believe me, if your income from your side hustle steadily matches or is over and above what you're getting from your form of employment right now, I promise you're not going to have any hesitation in leaving. The reason why you have a hesitation in leaving is because the money doesn't equal what you're currently earning. And so people risk it all without following the logic, which is the logic is money. Focus on making sure that your side hustle matches on income what you're making from your job. So now think about this realistically. If you're spending 8 hours a day working on your job, you should be spending 8 hours a day working on your own side hustle. Now you're going to say, how's that possible? I'll tell you, it's very easy. When you're hungry, when you're broke, when you're on the path to success, you don't live like a normal person. You should be up at 3 o'clock in the morning and spending 4 hours a day before you go to work on your own business. When you get home, you should be spending the next 4 hours of your day on your business. On the weekends, you should be spending every waking moment on your business. If you are serious about turning your side hustle into a main hustle, you've got to get off your backside. You've got to hustle. You've got to do the things that are uncomfortable. And unfortunately, you don't have the luxury. Dreams do not have the luxury of doing what everybody else has. You've got to get off your backside. You've got to go out there and you've got to figure out how to squeeze the extra time out of your day. And the difference between those who move from employment to self-employment, those who take a side hustle and turn it into a main hustle, is purely that they put in the time. You've got to force the time, you've got to make the time, and you've got to eradicate all forms of distraction. And you have to be very disciplined about not giving more than the time that you're being paid for at work.
I get that.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
So, to all the hustlers out there, you heard it straight from the horse's mouth. If you want to really make it, if you want to get off your backside and succeed, you've got to get going. And most importantly, you've got to figure out time asset allocation. Your time is an asset. You've got to figure out how to allocate it. Hustlers, if you found value from this episode of the podcast, please make sure that you leave us a rating and review on your favorite podcasting app. And remember to hit that subscribe and follow button so you never miss an episode of the Hustle Podcast. And remember, hustle makes muscle.
Stay motivated by The Hustle. Talkers talk, but hustlers hustle. Find more episodes at ecr.co.za or your favorite podcast app.